Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Before I dive into today's stories, I want to say, disclaimer. The content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I've always had a knack for digging up obscure bits of history, especially those shrouded in mystery and scientific speculation. It's not just a hobby, but a passion that led me to a discovery so unsettling yet fascinating that I felt compelled to share it here. This is about Experiment 101, a term I stumbled upon almost accidentally while browsing an old forum dedicated to the unexplained phenomena of ancient civilizations. It started one lazy Sunday afternoon. With a mug of coffee in one hand and my mouse in the other, I found myself navigating through layers of the dark web, something I do with caution, and for research, mind you. I was looking for any overlooked fragments of texts or misunderstood inventions of the ancients when I clicked on a mistakenly unsecured directory. It was labeled simply as E101. Curiosity, as it often does, got the best of me. Inside, there were numerous files and folders, each cryptically tagged with dates and alphanumeric codes. But one document in particular caught my eye. It was named the Giant Project Overview.pdf. With a skeptical yet intrigued mind, I opened it. The document appeared to be a detailed report from what I could only assume was a long-lost civilization, far more advanced than any known to current historians and archaeologists. The report started with a chilling objective: to explore the boundaries of human potential and survival through radical genetic enhancement and environmental adaptation. It was dated, shockingly, around 12,500 years ago, predating the oldest known civilizations like Sumer and ancient Egypt by thousands of years. As I scrolled through the digital pages, the scope of Experiment 101 began to reveal itself. It was not just a scientific experiment, it was an ambitious project that aimed at creating beings of enormous size through genetic modifications. The subjects were referred to as the enlarged ones, individuals selected based on some unknown criteria from their population. The report detailed various aspects of their creation, including intricate diagrams of gene editing techniques, reminiscent of CRISPR but seemingly more advanced and focused on gigantism and enhanced resilience. They had mapped out everything, from bone density enhancements to muscle fiber amplification, and even photosynthetic skin, to sustain these giants. It was as if I was reading a science fiction novel. In one section, a chart detailed the geographical distribution of these giants with markers spread across what is now known as Eurasia. Small notations indicated that these beings were integrated into the society to test not only their survival, but their ability to coexist with regular-sized humans. It was eerie reading about their interactions, described with clinical detachment and scientific curiosity. The experiment, however, wasn't meant to last. The document contained notes on the termination phase, where these giants were systematically removed from the environment. Reasons were unclear, but snippets of text referred to unanticipated ecological impacts and social integration challenges. It was unsettling to think about the rise and fall of such beings, brought into existence and wiped out by the hands of their creators. As I reached the end of the document, I found references to other files that hinted at more concrete evidence: photographs, location coordinates, even skeletal remains analysis. These were not accessible online, but the report suggested that tangible proof existed, safeguarded in undisclosed locations, likely to prevent any sort of treasure hunting or exploitation. Sitting back in my chair, I realized the sun had set long ago, and my coffee had turned cold. The weight of what I had just read was profound. It wasn't just about the possibility of giants or the ethical implications of such genetic experiments. It was about the layers of history that are hidden, waiting to be unearthed, telling stories that sound too incredible to be true. And there I was, left with a digital trail of an ancient experiment, wondering about the veracity of our understood history, pondering what else lies buried beneath the layers of the past. Motivated by the extraordinary claims and the detailed scientific descriptions found in the Giant Project overview, my next step was clear. I needed to find tangible evidence that could either substantiate or debunk the contents of that mysterious document. This journey would take me from the digital depths of obscure archives to physical locations that the ancient texts had alluded to as sites of significant importance. Firstly, I reached out to a few acquaintances who share my penchant for archaeology and ancient mysteries. One of them, Dr. Emily Cartwright, is an anthropologist known for her work on prehistoric human settlements. After ensuring her confidentiality on the matter, I shared the document with her. She was initially skeptical, of course, but the level of detail and the advanced scientific concepts outlined were too compelling to dismiss outright. Together, we began to cross-reference the geographical markers from the document with known archaeological sites. Several coordinates corresponded surprisingly well with locations of significant prehistoric findings, some of which had revealed unusually large human remains in the past. Remains that were often dismissed as anomalies or were simply not discussed widely in the scientific community. With this promising lead, our next step involved a trip to one of these sites, located in a remote area of the Carpathian Mountains. These mountains, steeped in legend and surrounded by folklore, were the perfect setting for a discovery that could rewrite history. Upon our arrival, the rugged landscape greeted us with its silent, looming peaks. The air was crisp, and as we trekked towards the specific coordinates, the sense of stepping through layers of time was palpable. The site was near a newly uncovered cave system, which local archaeologists had only begun to explore due to its difficult access, and the sheer vertical cliffs one had to navigate to reach it. With the help of professional climbers, we descended into the caverns. The walls were lined with primitive paintings that depicted human figures, some of which were dramatically larger than the others, standing beside or over them, painted with a mixture of awe and fear. It was a visual echo of the enlarged ones described in the document. As we ventured deeper, we came upon a section of the cave that had partially collapsed. Using ground-penetrating radar, a technology that allows archaeologists to detect and map subterranean features, we detected anomalies that suggested the presence of large, enclosed spaces behind the fallen boulders. This was consistent with the document's mention of burial chambers for the giants, purposely sealed off after the termination phase of the experiment. The excavation would take time, more than we had anticipated. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows into the cave, we marked the spot for future exploration. That night, back at our campsite, Dr. Cartwright and I discussed the potential implications of our findings. If what we suspected was true, this could not only prove the existence of the giants, but also confirm that an advanced human civilization, capable of complex genetic engineering, existed thousands of years before any known historical records. The mystery deepened, and the pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, hinting at a hidden chapter of human history. As I lay in my tent, the thought of standing on the brink of such a monumental discovery was both exhilarating and daunting. What else were we going to uncover? What truths lay buried in the ancient soil, waiting for the light of modern day to reveal them? Returning to the cave with a renewed sense of purpose and a full excavation team, we were determined to uncover what lay behind the collapsed section. The anticipation among the team was palpable. Every scrape of the trowel and stroke of the brush could potentially reveal more about the mysterious enlarged ones. As the days progressed, the excavation revealed that the collapsed boulders were indeed a deliberate barrier, an ancient attempt to seal off what lay beyond. When we finally breached the last layer of stone, the air that escaped from the newly opened chamber was cool and musty, filled with the silence of millennia. Inside, the chamber was larger than we had anticipated, and it was immediately clear that it was a place of some significance. The walls were adorned with more elaborate paintings, and in the center there was a raised platform made of stone. It was on this platform that we found them, 3 massive skeletal remains, each laid out meticulously with artifacts surrounding them. These remains were unlike any typical human skeletons. The bones were robust, their structure suggesting a height that would have easily surpassed 10 feet. The skulls were broad and elongated, with pronounced jawlines and orbital cavities that hinted at a visage far different from modern humans. Dr. Cartwright, overseeing the examination, confirmed that these were not deformities but rather traits of what appeared to be a distinct group, possibly genetically modified as the document had suggested. Each skeleton was associated with artifacts that could have been tools or ceremonial objects, crafted from materials that were not local to the region, including a type of metal that was strangely lightweight, yet exhibited extraordinary resilience when tested. Our findings were meticulously documented, and samples were taken with the utmost care to ensure nothing was contaminated or damaged. The implications of these findings were monumental, not just for archaeology, but for our understanding of human history and genetic science. One particularly intriguing artifact was a tablet with inscriptions that Dr. Cartwright speculated might be a form of historical record or a scientific log related to the giants. The language was unknown, a series of symbols that were neither pictographic nor cuneiform but something entirely different. We photographed the tablet in high resolution, planning to consult with linguistic experts to decipher its contents. The days at the site turned into weeks as we unearthed more evidence, each piece adding to the narrative of a civilization that had mastered genetic engineering to an extent far beyond what was thought possible for its time. It was a civilization that had flourished and then apparently vanished without a trace, except for the giants they left behind. As our findings were prepared for analysis and publication in academic journals, the story of Experiment 101 began to take shape as not just a myth or an anomaly, but a startling reality. We were rewriting history, and the world would soon need to reconsider what it knew about the ancient past. The revelations unearthed at the Carpathian site were groundbreaking, but bringing them to the forefront of scientific discourse proved to be a challenge that none of us had anticipated. Our initial findings, despite being meticulously documented and supported by undeniable physical evidence, were met with a significant amount of skepticism. As the lead on this project, I took it upon myself to coordinate the dissemination of our findings. I organized a symposium where we could present our results directly to a gathering of experts in archaeology, anthropology, and genetics. The goal was to facilitate an open dialogue and perhaps find collaborative opportunities to further explore the implications of our discovery. The symposium took place in a well-respected university auditorium filled with scholars eager to hear about the latest archaeological findings. When it was our turn to present, Dr. Cartwright and I stood before the audience, our presentation ready. We started by outlining the context of the discovery, the details of the excavation, and the subsequent analyses of the artifacts and skeletal remains. However, as we delved deeper into the genetic peculiarities and the advanced technology suggested by the artifacts, murmurs of disbelief began to ripple through the room. Some scholars questioned the authenticity of the findings, while others suggested that we had misinterpreted the data. A few were intrigued but cautious, asking pointed questions about the DNA analyses and the materials used in the artifact's construction. One particular point of contention was the tablet with the unknown inscriptions. A linguist from the audience suggested that it could simply be a decorative piece, not a form of written record as we had proposed. This skepticism was a blow, but it was not unexpected. History has shown that new ideas, especially those that challenge established paradigms, are often met with resistance. Undeterred, we invited our peers to review our work up close. We had brought high-resolution images and 3D models of the tablet, as well as detailed comparative analyses of the giant skeletons with known human genetic markers. By making our research as transparent and accessible as possible, we hope to foster a scientific environment open to extraordinary possibilities. In the weeks following the symposium, a small group of interested experts reached out to us. They were particularly fascinated by the metal artifacts and their composition, which, as further tests confirmed, included elements that did not match any known to current material sciences. This anomaly opened the door to more focused studies, which were aimed at not only understanding the metal's properties, but also at locating the possible sources of such materials. These collaborative efforts gradually began to turn the tide. As more data was gathered and shared, the academic community started to recognize the potential reality of a prehistoric advanced civilization capable of genetic engineering. The shift was slow, but it was happening. Our next steps involved detailed genetic sequencing and an in-depth study of the environmental impacts these giants might have had on their surroundings. Each finding added a layer of credibility to our claims and helped to construct a more complete picture of this ancient society. As our research into Experiment 101 drew to a close, the broader scientific community began to embrace the reality of our findings. The publication of our genetic analysis marked a turning point. This detailed study not only confirmed the genetic modifications in the giant skeletons, but also revealed links to known human DNA sequences, suggesting that these ancient beings were indeed a branch of humanity, albeit one that had been dramatically altered at the hands of their own scientists. The implications of this discovery were profound. Educational institutions began incorporating the possibility of prehistoric advanced civilizations into their curricula, sparking a renewed interest in archaeology and anthropology among students. Documentaries and articles about our work brought the discussion to the public sphere, raising questions about what else might be buried just beneath our feet, waiting to be discovered. One of the most exciting developments was the establishment of a new research facility dedicated to the study of ancient technologies and genetic sciences, funded by a coalition of educational institutions and private foundations. Dr. Cartwright and I were invited to lead a team of experts focused on exploring further the technological artifacts we had discovered, particularly the unusual metal and its properties. As we delved deeper, we found that the metal had properties that could revolutionize material science. It was incredibly durable yet lightweight, capable of withstanding extreme pressures and temperatures. The potential applications ranged from aerospace engineering to medical implants, showcasing how discoveries from the past could propel future innovations. The final piece of the puzzle was the deciphering of the tablet's inscriptions. Working with linguists and cryptographers, we developed a translation algorithm based on the patterns we observed in the text. The tablet turned out to be a scientific log, detailing the procedures used in creating the giants and the ethical dilemmas the scientists faced. It was a window into the minds of people who, thousands of years ago, grappled with many of the same questions we face in modern science. This historical and ethical insight prompted a global dialogue about the direction of our current genetic research and its implications for humanity. It reminded us that the power of science comes with great responsibility, a lesson that was as relevant in the ancient past as it is today. In conclusion, the discovery of Experiment 101 has not only altered our understanding of human history, but also enriched our capacity to shape the future. It serves as a testament to the curiosity and ingenuity of humankind, characteristics that transcend time and continue to drive us forward. As we stand on the brink of new scientific horizons, we do so with a greater awareness of our past, ready to face the ethical challenges that come with our technological advancements. The giants of Experiment 101, once mere subjects of a forgotten era, now stand as beacons guiding our way into the future. Thank you for following this journey into our hidden past. The story of Experiment 101 continues as we explore more sites and uncover further evidence of our astonishing ancient world. Stay tuned for more updates as we continue to uncover the mysteries of our origins. Like any other quiet evening, I was nestled in my small home office, sorting through old family photo albums and several dusty boxes of keepsakes. My grandmother had recently passed away, and as her only grandchild, the duty of clearing out her attic had fallen to me. Among the piles of forgotten relics and sepia-toned photographs, I stumbled upon a heavy, old-fashioned, leather-bound journal marked with the initials J.E.M. My grandfather, John Edward Marley. Curiosity piqued, I flipped through its yellowed pages filled with meticulously penned entries. However, tucked between the pages were several cryptic notes and newspaper clippings about unexplained phenomena from the 60s and 70s. Sightings of mysterious lights in the sky, unclaimed metallic objects found in nearby woods, and reports of sudden radio blackouts. My grandfather had been a stern, reticent man, a well-respected figure in our small town, and hardly the type to dabble in what most would call conspiracy theories. The contents of this journal painted a different picture, one of a man deeply entangled in mysteries that were far from ordinary. Driven by a newfound curiosity about my grandfather's secret interests, I decided to delve deeper into this unexpected mystery. Knowing that my tech-savvy cousin had once mentioned the dark web as a resource for finding rare books and obscure information, I reached out to him for guidance on how to safely navigate this hidden part of the internet. After setting up the necessary security measures and obtaining the right tools, I accessed the dark web. It wasn't long before I discovered a forum dedicated to the kind of phenomena my grandfather seemed interested in. Using the anonymity of my online persona, I posted scans of the clippings and notes I'd found, asking if anyone could provide more information or context. The responses were surprisingly quick and detailed. Several users commented not just on the phenomena, but pointed out that the events mentioned in the clippings coincided with secretive government projects from that era. One user, in particular, sent me a private message, claiming they had similar documents passed down from their own family, which suggested a network of ordinary families who were, knowingly or unknowingly, part of an operation to monitor extraterrestrial activities discreetly. According to this stranger, our grandparents were not merely passive observers, but were part of a civilian watchdog group that collaborated with a covert government program to document and conceal the presence of non-human entities. This program supposedly acted under the guise of a community watch group that spanned across several states. Intrigued and a bit skeptical, I asked for proof. The user sent me blurred photographs of old letters and official-looking documents with redacted names and places, but the dates and descriptions matched those in my grandfather's journal. They suggested that perhaps our families were more connected than we realized, tied together by a thread woven through generations, hidden in plain sight. As I absorbed the weight of this revelation, the logical part of me argued that it might just be an elaborate hoax, a well-crafted story fed to a gullible newcomer. Yet, the documents, the personal accounts, and the undeniable alignment with my grandfather's hidden notes argued otherwise. I decided to dig deeper into the journal to uncover more about my family's role in this enigmatic chapter of history. Was it possible that my unassuming grandparents were guardians of one of the greatest secrets known to humankind? The question lingered in my mind as I closed the journal and prepared for a deep dive into my family's past, unaware of just how profound and unsettling my discoveries might become. After spending another late night poring over the journal, a folded, brittle map fell out from between the back cover. It was a detailed sketch of our town and the surrounding areas, with several spots marked with small red X's. What struck me was the precision of it all. Each X was annotated with a date and a short description that matched some of the events in the journal entries. These weren't just random notes, they were observations, detailed logs of unusual activities that seemed to correlate with the historic sightings documented in those old clippings. Fueled by a mix of excitement and a hint of trepidation, I decided to visit these locations. The first spot was an overgrown field on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes and rarely visited by the locals. According to the map, It was the site where an unusual metallic debris was found in the summer of 1969. Today, it was just an empty field, but as I walked through the tall swaying grass, I couldn't help but feel I was walking through a silent chapter of hidden history. The next marked location was more familiar. It was near the old water tower, a place often talked about in town for its supposed strange electromagnetic disturbances. Locals avoided it at night, attributing the static on their radios and sudden car breakdowns to the odd energy of the place. As a child, I had heard stories about the tower, but I had always dismissed them as town folklore. Determined to uncover more tangible evidence, I reached out to the local historical society to see if they had any records or oral histories that mentioned the phenomena. To my surprise, the librarian, Mrs. Watkins, was more than willing to help. She revealed that her own grandmother had been part of the same watch group as my grandfather and had often spoken of meetings where townsfolk would gather to discuss the visitors and their gifts. These meetings, she explained, were not about fear or conspiracy, but about understanding and safely interacting with these extraordinary occurrences. Her grandmother had described them as collaborative efforts to document and shield these secrets, not for exploitation, but to ensure that the knowledge was handled responsibly and ethically. They believed that such interactions could lead to advancements in human understanding and technology, albeit not at the cost of safety and privacy. With Mrs. Watkins' help, I arranged to meet with 2 other senior members of the community who were also descendants of the original group members. We convened in the back room of the local diner, a place filled with nostalgic memorabilia and the faint scent of coffee and pie. There, over a quiet afternoon, they shared stories handed down by their families, tales of objects that defied gravity, of lights that danced in the sky with purpose, and of a collective oath to keep these wonders a secret, not out of fear, but out of respect for knowledge not yet meant to be public. One of the elders, Mr. Thompson, brought along an old radio set he claimed was found near one of the marked spots. It was unlike any radio I had ever seen, compact and made of materials that looked ahead of their time. He demonstrated how it would sporadically pick up what he called the whispers, faint, unintelligible sounds that seemed like a form of communication. As the meeting drew to a close, I was gifted an old key by Mrs. Watkins. "This," she said, "will give you access to a place where more answers lie. It's up to you now to learn, but remember, with knowledge comes responsibility." That evening, as I left the diner with the old radio and the key in my pocket, I felt a deep sense of purpose. The map, the meetings, the stories, they all pointed to a reality that was much bigger and far more mysterious than I had ever imagined. My journey was just beginning, and I was determined to follow it wherever it led, respecting the legacy of those who had chosen me to carry it forward. The key Mrs. Watkins gave me was old and ornate, the kind you'd imagine unlocking a grand castle or an ancient vault. But its purpose was far more intriguing than I had anticipated. According to her instructions, it opened a hidden door inside the local museum, a museum that on the surface was dedicated to the natural history and early settlers of our region. On a clear, brisk Saturday morning, I visited the museum. It was a quaint building, overshadowed by the more modern attractions of the town, but it held a charm that drew in those who loved history. I approached the curator, Mrs. Gray, an old family friend, and showed her the key. Her eyes widened with recognition, and without a word, she led me to a small, unassuming exhibit on meteorological phenomena. Behind a display about weather patterns and old barometers, Mrs. Gray pressed on a seemingly decorative panel that swung open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. The air was cool and musty as we descended into the dimly lit corridor below. At the end of the corridor was a heavy wooden door. I inserted the key, turned it, and felt a click as the lock disengaged. The room was small and lined with shelves filled with various artifacts, documents, and old pieces of technology that seemed out of place for their time. Mrs. Gray explained that this was a private archive, a collection of all the items and information the watch group had gathered over the decades. As I browsed the shelves, I discovered detailed reports of each encounter, complete with sketches and even photographs of aerial phenomena. Some looked like advanced aircraft, while others were distinctly organic in shape. There were also pieces of what appeared to be machinery. Their purpose and construction were beyond my understanding, but suggested advanced engineering. One particular document caught my attention. It was a detailed map of the night sky as it appeared over our town 50 years ago, marked with specific coordinates and times. Attached to it was a note, written in my grandfather's handwriting, describing a scheduled visitation. The note detailed how these visitations were predictable to an extent, and that the objects observed were not hostile but merely observers themselves. It dawned on me that the group wasn't just tracking random events. They were part of a scheduled, perhaps welcomed interaction with these visitors. This idea was both unsettling and exhilarating. The implications of such interactions were profound. Had our technological advancements been influenced by these encounters? Were these visits still happening? Mrs. Gray noticed my fascination and handed me another set of documents. These were more recent, dating back just a decade, and showed that observations had decreased but not ceased. The group had grown smaller over the years as fewer people were initiated into the secret, and those who knew began to pass away. "The key isn't just for this door," Mrs. Gray said as we prepared to leave the room. "It's for unlocking the barriers between what we know and what we are capable of understanding. Your grandfather believed that this knowledge should eventually be shared, but only when the world was ready." As I left the museum, the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. I had access to one of the greatest secrets our town, and perhaps humanity, possessed. The challenge now was to decide how to best honor this legacy, continue the observation, and possibly prepare for the day when the truth could be revealed. My next steps were unclear, but I knew I had to proceed with caution. The watch group had guarded this secret for generations, believing that humanity was not yet ready for such revelations. I needed to find out why, and in doing so, determine if that day of readiness might be closer than we all thought. With the secrets of the hidden room still vivid in my mind, I set about understanding my role in this legacy of watchers. It seemed crucial to not only preserve this knowledge, but also to discern the implications of sharing it. The document suggested a delicate balance between secrecy and disclosure, hinting at a broader involvement that went beyond our small town. Curiosity led me to convert my home office into a makeshift research station. I equipped it with the old radio set Mr. Thompson had given me, along with other technological relics from the museum's secret collection. Night after night, I experimented with the radio, adjusting its dials in the hopes of catching the elusive whispers once more. One quiet evening, as the town settled into a sleepy lull, the radio crackled to life, emitting a sequence of unusual, rhythmic sounds that seemed almost intentional. Realizing the potential significance of these transmissions, I recorded every instance. Over time, I began to notice patterns, repetitions that suggested a form of communication. Armed with this data, I reached out to an online community of amateur cryptologists, sharing snippets of the sounds while keeping their origin a secret. The collaborative effort was thrilling. Ideas and theories bounced back and forth, each contributor adding a piece to the intricate puzzle. Meanwhile, I also delved deeper into the historical aspect of the watch group. I revisited the museum several times, meeting with Mrs. Gray to pore over old meeting minutes and correspondence between past members. These documents painted a picture of a community united by a profound responsibility. They were not merely passive observers. They actively engaged in a form of stewardship, ensuring that whatever knowledge was gained from these encounters was used ethically and wisely. As I pieced together the past and present, I planned a community meeting in the spirit of the original group's gatherings. It was time to bring together the remaining descendants of the Watchers and possibly initiate new members. The meeting was set to take place at the local library, a neutral site accessible to all. The evening of the meeting, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. As people began to fill the room, I recognized faces from around town, each person likely unaware of the real history we were all connected to. I opened the meeting with a brief introduction, careful not to reveal too much too soon. Instead, I spoke of our town's unique history and the unexplained phenomena that many had likely dismissed as mere local lore. To my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Stories began to emerge from the attendees, tales passed down from grandparents, unexplained sightings, and strange occurrences that had never been fully understood. The atmosphere was one of curiosity and a shared eagerness to learn more. As the meeting drew to a close, I proposed the formation of a new group, one that would continue the legacy of observation and stewardship. I emphasized the importance of discretion and the ethical considerations of such knowledge. To those interested, I offered a chance to view the documents and artifacts under strict conditions to ensure the continued safety and confidentiality of the information. Leaving the library that night, I felt a profound connection to my grandfather and the other original members. They had chosen to protect and study these mysteries quietly. And now, I was taking the first steps to not only preserve, but possibly expand on their work. The road ahead was uncertain, but the foundation of respect and responsibility they had laid gave me hope that we were ready to face whatever truths lay ahead. In the weeks following the community meeting, our newly formed group, which we named the Observer's Legacy, grew in both numbers and enthusiasm. Each member brought a unique perspective, from amateur astronomers to historians, all united by a shared curiosity and a commitment to responsibly manage the knowledge we held. Our first official gathering was in the hidden room at the museum. With Mrs. Gray's blessing, we arranged a private viewing of the artifacts and documents for the group. Seeing the tangible pieces of this vast puzzle together sparked a sense of awe and a deeper understanding of the significance of our task. We discussed how to catalog the information and debated the ethical implications of our eventual findings. It was agreed that any significant discoveries would be discussed internally before taking any further action. Parallel to our historical research, I spearheaded an initiative to modernize our observation techniques. Using the old radio as a foundation, we incorporated newer technology to enhance our ability to intercept and decode the mysterious signals. With the help of a local university's engineering department, we developed a more sophisticated listening device that could filter and analyze the frequencies more effectively. One crisp autumn night during one of our scheduled observations, our new system intercepted a clear, structured sequence of sounds that differed markedly from any natural radio noise or known communication signals. The room buzzed with excitement. This was the first undeniable proof that we were on the right path. The sequence was recorded and sent for further analysis, with hopes that it might finally provide a breakthrough in understanding the intentions and origins of these signals. Amidst our technical pursuits, I felt it was vital to keep the community involved and informed to the extent that was safe and prudent. To foster a broader dialogue, I organized a series of educational seminars held at the local library. These sessions covered the history of astronomical phenomena, the basics of radio communications, and the role of ethics in the exploration of unknown phenomena. The seminars were well received, cultivating a town-wide interest in astronomy and the mysteries that surrounded our community. As winter approached, bringing reflective quiet to our town, I took to spending more evenings in my grandfather's study, where it all began. Surrounded by his belongings, I felt a deep connection to his legacy. It was during one such evening that I found a sealed envelope tucked away in a drawer, addressed to the next guardian. Inside, my grandfather had left a letter expressing his hopes for the future, a future where fear of the unknown was replaced by curiosity and respect. Inspired by his words, I penned an article summarizing our journey and our aspirations. Careful to omit sensitive details, and submitted it to a well-respected science magazine. When it was published, the response was overwhelmingly positive, drawing attention from other like-minded groups and researchers who were also exploring similar phenomena. As the year drew to a close, the Observer's legacy had transformed from a small, secretive gathering into a beacon of community science and ethical stewardship. We were not only observers but active participants in a larger dialogue about our place in the cosmos and the responsible handling of extraordinary knowledge. Looking forward, it was clear that our journey was far from over. Each new discovery fed our hunger for understanding, and with each step forward, we honored those who had taken the first steps in silence. Their legacy was no longer hidden in shadow, but illuminated by our efforts to bring light to the unknown, guided by a simple yet powerful principle. With great knowledge comes great responsibility. Okay, so I know how this is going to sound. I'm just some guy who thought he'd get a thrill out of visiting the dark web. Yeah, I know it's cliché. I'd heard stories, but I was never one to believe in the paranormal or anything supernatural, and I definitely didn't think I'd end up in a situation where I'd be writing something like this, hoping maybe someone out there could tell me what the hell I should do. This all started about 2 weeks ago. I was home, a slow Friday night, nothing to do, and my friends were either busy or out of town. Boredom is a dangerous thing, and I guess I just wanted to see if the stories I'd heard about cursed games on the dark web were real. After a bit of Googling and digging around forums, I found my way to a link buried in some obscure chat room. The title was something like Anima, which sounded mysterious enough to catch my interest. The page looked straightforward, no weird pop-ups or sketchy graphics. It almost looked too simple, actually. The game downloaded fast, and it didn't even take up much space, which I found weird. I figured it was just some bootleg software. The instructions said to play with the lights off and the room silent, but there was nothing about what the game was supposed to do. It only asked for one thing: look straight at the screen until you see yourself. Now I know how ridiculous that sounds, but in the moment, I brushed it off as a weird gimmick. I set my laptop on my desk, turned off the lights, and sat in front of the screen. The game loaded up with this quiet, almost white noise hum in the background. The screen was pitch black except for a faint flickering circle in the middle, like a candle flame, but without any defined edges. I leaned in closer, squinting, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Then, almost imperceptibly, I saw something in the reflection, like a shadow hovering just behind me, almost out of sight. I assumed it was a trick of the light from the screen, or maybe just my eyes playing games with me in the dark. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe the brightness of the screen was causing some kind of afterimage effect, but it was when I closed the game that things started to get strange. I'll be the first to admit that my mind was probably hyped up from the eerie atmosphere, but for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the sensation that there was something not quite tangible, just there. Every time I walked past a mirror, or even glanced at a reflective surface, it felt like there was a subtle shift, like something was there and then gone before I could focus on it. I chalked it up to my imagination, but the feeling didn't go away. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but the second I turned it off and saw my face reflected in the black screen, I felt it again, that faint outline just behind my shoulder, lingering. When I looked over, of course, nothing was there. It was subtle, like a trick of the light, but it felt too specific, too pointed, like I was supposed to notice it. I told myself it was just the atmosphere of the game messing with me and went to bed. Laying in the dark, though, it was like my mind kept inventing shapes in the shadows of my room, little glimmers just at the edge of my vision. I tossed and turned all night, restless and convinced there was nothing wrong, that it was just in my head. The next morning, I shook it off as one of those things. I mean, we've all had those creepy moments, right? But things didn't stop there. I wish I could say the feeling disappeared after that first night, but it didn't. In fact, things started to feel even more off. When I woke up that Saturday, I felt drained, like I hadn't actually slept at all. It was one of those mornings where I just wanted to shake off the weirdness from the night before. But the minute I walked past the bathroom mirror, I swear, there was something different. I didn't see anything directly, no ghostly face or shape, nothing you'd find in a horror movie, but the reflection felt wrong. It was like my room looked slightly out of place, like objects were just a bit shifted from where I knew I'd left them. Even my reflection felt a bit off, almost like it was me, but not. I shrugged it off as leftover nerves and went about my day, but it was hard to ignore the uneasy feeling that followed me. Later, I decided to run some errands to get out of the house and shake off the strangeness. But the weird feeling didn't let up. It was like there was a subtle tension around me, a quiet but persistent discomfort, like someone was on the edge of saying something but never did. I even tried glancing around a few times just in case someone was nearby. Not that I expected anyone, but of course it was just me. By the time I got home, it felt like a shadow had settled over the entire day, like a nagging memory I couldn't shake. I decided to open up my laptop and see if I could find anything else about the game I'd downloaded. Maybe other people had weird experiences too. But oddly enough, when I went back to the same link, the page was gone. I tried digging around for any mention of anima or anything even remotely similar, but there was nothing. Curiosity got the better of me, so I searched through forums and even posted a question about it. But the responses were all the same. People saying they'd never heard of it or warning me about getting too deep into haunted games on the dark web. One reply suggested that I might have stumbled onto an experimental program or an unlisted indie horror project, which seemed likely, but it didn't quite sit right with me. As the days went by, things didn't get any better. In fact, the unsettling sensation seemed to grow. Every now and then I'd catch a flicker in my peripheral vision, as if something was shifting just out of sight. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but constant enough that I couldn't ignore it. The strangest thing, though, was my reflection. I'd catch myself glancing into mirrors more often, and each time something looked off. I know it sounds strange, but my reflection started to feel like it was taking on a life of its own. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring, almost expecting it to move without me, like it was some kind of separate version of me waiting for something. I thought about telling someone, maybe a friend or even my family, but I stopped myself. How was I supposed to explain any of this without sounding paranoid? And it's not like I could just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, my reflection is acting weird." It was ridiculous, and the last thing I wanted was to sound like I'd lost it. By the end of that week, I had made a habit of avoiding mirrors as much as possible, brushing my teeth without looking directly at the mirror, getting dressed in front of the closet instead. It wasn't that I was scared exactly, but there was this growing feeling of unease, like I was trying to keep some invisible barrier between myself and whatever I was seeing. At this point, I was torn between laughing it off and genuinely wondering if I'd triggered something, some dormant, bizarre effect from that game. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. At this point, I'd become hyper-aware of every reflective surface in my house, especially in places I'd usually ignore. Things like the microwave door, my TV screen when it was off, even my phone screen when it would go dark. It wasn't that I wanted to look. It was almost like something kept drawing my attention there, as if daring me to catch a glimpse of whatever it was. The worst moment happened that Sunday evening. I'd been working on a project for my job and got up to take a break. It was dark outside, and I remember catching a glimpse of my reflection in the sliding glass door leading to the balcony. At first, everything looked normal, but then I noticed that faint, strange shape again, like a shadow lurking just out of view. I squinted, trying to get a better look without moving closer, and that's when it happened. For just a split second, it seemed like my reflection didn't quite match up with my own movements. I leaned in ever so slightly just to confirm, but by then everything was back to normal. I stepped away, heart pounding, though I tried to convince myself it was just some kind of delayed response from the glass. But there was no shaking the idea that something was wrong. The most unnerving part? I felt like whatever it was, that shadowy outline, had started to expect me to notice it. I spent the rest of the evening actively avoiding looking into anything reflective. I sat on the couch, facing away from the balcony door and trying to distract myself with a show on my laptop. I even checked the brightness on my screen to make sure I couldn't see anything beyond what was on the display. I know it sounds paranoid, but there was this quiet sense of being invaded, like my home had this extra presence, one that wasn't entirely welcome. By Monday, I'd convinced myself that this had to be my mind playing tricks. I figured I just needed some fresh air, so I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood. It was just starting to get dark, that in-between time when streetlights start to flicker on, but it isn't fully night yet. As I walked, I tried to focus on the normal sounds of the neighborhood. Kids playing down the street, the occasional car passing by, a dog barking in someone's yard. For a little while, it actually helped. I felt a bit of relief, like maybe I was finally letting go of this weird obsession. Then, as I was passing a parked car, I glanced down at the side mirror, just for a second, and there it was again. That shadow. Only this time, it was clearer, like it was solidifying, becoming more defined. I quickly looked away, refusing to let myself linger, but it was too late. That brief image burned itself into my mind, and for the first time I started to feel genuinely unnerved. I kept telling myself it was just a trick of light or my imagination, but every time I saw that shadow, it seemed to grow just a bit more defined, as though it was gradually slipping out of wherever it was hiding. The next few days were a weird balancing act. On one hand, I kept telling myself it was all in my head, that my mind was just fixating on something random and turning it into a full-blown paranoia. But on the other, I couldn't ignore how real it felt. Each night, I'd notice subtle shifts in the air around me, a slight change in the way my room felt, like it was charged with a strange, silent energy. I started developing a habit of double-checking every corner of my apartment, like I was looking for proof that nothing was out of place. I wasn't seeing anything obvious, no strange shapes or signs, but the feeling was still there, lingering in the background, like a quiet pressure I couldn't escape. At times, I'd even catch myself talking out loud, saying things like, "You're imagining it," just to make myself feel more grounded. One night, while brushing my teeth, I felt compelled to look directly into the mirror, hoping maybe if I just stared long enough, I'd break this strange cycle. I leaned closer, almost challenging my reflection, waiting for something, anything to happen. But all I saw was my own face, tired and a bit haunted from all the stress. It was almost comforting, seeing nothing unusual, until I noticed a faint foggy outline near the edge of the mirror. This was different. It wasn't a shadow behind me, but more like a blur in the corner of the glass itself, like something trying to seep through. I quickly wiped the mirror with my hand, thinking maybe it was just condensation from the bathroom, but the smudge stayed, unchanging. I stared at it, feeling that same quiet unease building up again, and then it vanished, almost like it had never been there. After that, I avoided the bathroom mirror altogether for a few days. I'd use the mirror in my bedroom, even if it meant slightly worse lighting. But that only lasted until I realized the shadow was creeping into that one too. Faint at first, but growing more defined each time I glanced over. It was like a pattern was forming, one I couldn't quite understand, as if it was shifting from one mirror to the next. Around that time, I started doing some deeper research, looking up reflections acting strange and shadowy outlines in mirrors. but all I found were horror stories or urban legends. Nothing practical or helpful, just other people describing their own eerie experiences with reflections. Some claimed it was a sign of something crossing over or a residual energy trapped in reflections, but I wasn't interested in theories. I wanted answers. I even tried to convince myself to stop looking at reflections entirely, hoping it would break this cycle. But it was easier said than done. Every time I walked by a reflective surface, it felt like an invisible thread pulling my gaze, drawing me to look, like there was something just waiting for me to acknowledge it. That evening, while making a quick meal, I caught sight of something in the reflection of my microwave door. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but the shadow was there again, even more defined than before. I turned around, expecting to see an object or something casting the outline, but there was nothing. Just me in my kitchen, standing alone. By now, the experience had shifted from a quiet discomfort to a full-blown fixation. I was starting to feel like my own apartment was subtly against me, the reflection of each familiar room feeling just a bit too foreign. The odd thing was, nothing had actually happened. No noises, no objects moving. But there was an undeniable sense of waiting. It was as if something was poised on the edge of making itself known, and I was on a silent countdown. Then, one night, the strangest thing happened. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when my screen suddenly went dark. At first, I assumed the battery had died, but when I looked up, I noticed a shadowed outline in the reflection of the blank screen right over my shoulder. I froze, every instinct telling me to turn around, but instead, I stayed still, focusing on the reflection. The shape had definition now, not enough to make out details, but enough to tell that it was undeniably there. I tilted the phone slightly, almost testing it, and sure enough, the outline followed, just hovering in the background, not moving, just existing. I finally built up the nerve to look over my shoulder, but of course there was nothing there. When I looked back at my phone, the screen had gone back to the home screen, no shadow to be found. I sighed, a strange mix of relief and frustration. Part of me just wanted this weirdness to end, to return to normal, but another part felt oddly intrigued, like I was on the verge of uncovering something. Determined to try one last thing, I went to the bathroom, turned off the lights, and sat on the floor with my phone screen on dark mode, holding it up to face the mirror. I figured if something was going on with my reflection, this would be the moment it might reveal itself. I don't know why I thought this would work, but there was something about the stillness that felt different, like the room itself was watching. I sat there, the faint glow of my phone barely illuminating my face, waiting. My own reflection was clear, nothing unusual, just me sitting in the dim light. But the longer I stared, the more the shadow began to reappear, not in the mirror this time, but as a faint outline right on my phone screen. It was right behind me, hovering in that same silent, expectant way. And then, in one strange, inexplicable moment, the outline seemed to lean just a bit closer, like it was peering over my shoulder, waiting for me to do something. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, the screen was back to normal. No shadow, no outline, just my reflection, tired but relieved. From that day on, I made a pact with myself to ignore reflections as much as possible. No more lingering near mirrors, no more testing my luck with blank screens. It felt like whatever it was had reached its peak, like it had shown itself to me as much as it could, and that was enough. Since then, things have been quiet, normal, like none of this ever happened. But every now and then, I'll catch myself glancing at a reflection out of habit, expecting a shadow to be there, waiting, only to see nothing but my own face, staring back. And maybe that's all it ever was. Or maybe it's still waiting for the moment I dare to look a bit closer.